Well, the Prime Minister is pushing states to make border bans and snap restrictions a thing of the past for those Australians fully vaccinated. It comes after days of pressure from doctors and business groups to outline a roadmap to reopen. Let's go live to political reporter Trudy McIntosh. Trudy, it might seem a bit of a low bar, but it's not, insignificant. Australians would both be able to holiday and maybe even, if they're in a city that's locked down, avoid that lockdown.
Well, Tom, it would provide that level of certainty that so many people you talk to are requiring. When you're thinking of booking an interstate holiday, in the back of a lot of people's mind, there is always the looming threat. What if there is a snap lockdown and you have to spend days in your home? The Prime Minister has been spending the last few days fielding questions about a roadmap to reopening, particularly when it comes to the international border. But it seems very clear he's not for turning on that it's not going to be reopening anytime soon, even for fully vaccinated Australians. But this morning we've seen the first real hint from him about what could change within Australia. Scott Morrison making the case that fully vaccinated people wouldn't necessarily have to skip going to the footy or public transport or family gatherings if we can get to this point. But I would say there's a pretty big caveat on this. Are state premiers willing to accept this? Is Mark McGowan, for example, willing to let people into WA who was coming from a place that potentially had a COVID hotspot if they had had 2 jabs? Here was Scott Morrison, though.
I think the next most achievable step, because Australia, with our international borders up, means that vaccinated Australians would be in a much lower risk position when restrictions were to kick in on Australians going on public transport or going to theatres or going to the footy or whatever they might do, family get-togethers. If they're all vaccinated, then obviously the risks are a lot less.
We've seen some pretty strong advocacy from doctors and business leaders in the last few days about the need to reopen the international border in particular. Virgin CEO Jane Herdlicker, the latest to do that overnight. She's got herself in a bit of hot water, though, you'd have to say, making the case that the borders should be open. Obviously, Virgin wants that for their international travel business. But she says it needs to happen even if some Australians would die as a result. These comments have caused a lot of criticism and pushback, the Prime Minister himself calling them insensitive.
During the course of this pandemic, Australia have avoided 30,000 lives lost when you compare it to the average fatality rate of like countries in the OECD. 30,000 lives could have otherwise have been lost had we not had the success we've had as a country working together. And so I think that has to be understood. And I regret that those comments were somewhat insensitive, and I would encourage people. 910 Australians have lost their lives. Every single one of those lives was a terrible tragedy.
Now, Virgin's PR machine in full flight this morning, a tweet on the Virgin account saying, quote, "The safety of our guests has always been our #1 priority. Nothing will change that." So a bit of quick clean-up act there, Tom, from the Virgin PR team.